Welcome to Stories for Sleep, where stories are not only meant to be heard, but to help you soften and gently drift into sleep. Tonight, we will travel back in time, more than 4,000 years ago, to a strange moment in human history, when almost at the same time, the most powerful empires on Earth began to collapse, and no one truly knows why. Perhaps you are lying there, your body already tired, but your mind still holding on to unfinished thoughts. And instead of trying to stop them, we will slowly settle through a story that is very distant, yet also very close. Carl Gustav Jung once said that what we do not understand often operates beneath the surface of our lives. And tonight, we will gently touch a mystery like that. If you enjoy journeys like this, you can subscribe to Stories for Sleep, so that each night, a gentle story is always waiting for you. And now, allow yourself to relax. We begin. There are nights when everything around you seems stable. The city lights are still glowing. Life continues in its steady rhythm, and you may quietly believe that tomorrow will come just like any other day. For a very long time, human beings have carried such a quiet belief that the world has order, that the seasons will arrive on time, that rivers will continue to flow as they always have. But if you listen deeply into history, you will begin to notice something very different. There was a time, more than 4,000 years ago, when almost simultaneously, the greatest civilizations on Earth, those that seemed impossible to collapse, began to crack, to weaken, and to fade away. Not in a single day, not from a single battle, but as if the entire ancient world was slowly drifting into a long twilight, without anyone truly understanding why. And the strange thing is, even today, science still does not have a clear answer. Was it climate? Was it war? Or a series of small events layering upon each other until nothing could continue? Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And perhaps what happened around 2200 BCE was something like that. Something quietly accumulating beyond the awareness of the people at that time, until it revealed itself like a kind of collective fate. In tonight's journey, you will not only hear about the collapse of ancient empires, but also begin to feel something deeper, that the stability we trust may only be a very thin layer, and beneath it, there are always slow, yet powerful movements. Let your body soften, let your mind open, and step into this story. A story not only about the past, but one that reflects the world and yourself right now. The illusion of stability. There is a feeling, one you may have experienced many times, a feeling difficult to name, yet easy to recognize. It is when everything around you seems fine, when today feels like yesterday, and you gently believe that tomorrow will be the same. From the earliest times, humans have lived with such a quiet belief that seasons will come on time, that rain will return in familiar cycles, that rivers will rise and fall, as they always have. A sense of stability, never needing to be questioned, yet always present, like an invisible foundation beneath life. But if you listen slowly, deeply, you may begin to notice something else. That stability may simply be a story the mind tells to feel safe. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." There are things moving beneath our awareness, slow movements, almost impossible to see, yet powerful enough to shape the world. And sometimes, because we do not see them, we believe they do not exist. Imagine an ancient farmer standing in his field. He looks at the sky sees familiar clouds, feels the soil beneath his feet, holding moisture as it always has, and he believes the coming harvest will be good, not because he has data, not because he has predictive models, but because everything before has always happened this way. That belief is not wrong, but it is not entirely true. It is a continuation of memory, extended into the future, and that is where the illusion of stability is born. Not a lie, but a simplification, a way for the human mind, which cannot grasp the full complexity of reality, to create a version that is understandable. A world where things repeat, where there is order, where things can be predicted. But reality is not always like that. Some changes do not arrive like a storm. They do not have clear signs. They do not have a moment when everyone suddenly realizes everything has changed. Instead, they come very slowly. A rainy season arrives a little later. A river rises a little less. A harvest becomes slightly less abundant. Small changes, almost insignificant when seen individually, but when they accumulate over years, over generations, they begin to create something much larger. And the most dangerous part is that people often do not notice until it is too late. Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." But perhaps the reverse is also true. Within the order we trust, there may already be a quiet chaos forming. Stability is not a fixed state. It is a fragile balance between countless elements: climate, land, water, people, belief, social structure. And when even one of those shifts, even slightly, the entire system can begin to tremble. But because these shifts are so small, so slow, they make no noise, no warning, no clear signal, only a subtle feeling that something is no longer the same, yet no one can point to exactly what has changed. And that is where history becomes deeply human, because humans do not only live in reality, but in the stories they tell about reality. And when reality begins to change, but the story remains the same, a gap begins to form, a gap between what is happening and what we believe is happening. And when that gap grows large enough, collapse is no longer a shock, it becomes inevitable. But even then, it does not come with a loud noise. It comes very quietly. A city with fewer people each year, a trade route no longer busy, a system of power losing trust. No single moment when everything collapses, only days when things are no longer as they were. And if you listen closely, you may notice this does not belong only to the past. In your own life, there are also such illusions of stability, habits, relationships, beliefs that you assume will always be there, not because you are certain, but because they have always been there. But just like ancient civilizations, everything is moving, even when you do not notice. And perhaps what matters is not controlling all change, but realizing that true stability does not come from things never changing, but from your ability to be with change. Because when you begin to see that everything is temporary, not in a frightening way, but in a natural way, you begin to let go of the need to keep everything the same. And in that letting go, there is a different kind of peace. Not the peace of perfection, but the peace of not needing everything to be perfect. Like civilizations that believed they would last forever, yet still changed, still faded, and were replaced by new forms. You too can allow yourself to be in that flow, without resisting, without clinging, simply noticing that everything is moving very slowly, very deeply, and very naturally. And if you listen a little deeper, you may begin to sense that the stability humans seek does not truly lie outside, but within, a feeling that things are as they should be. But what is interesting is that feeling does not always reflect reality. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. And sometimes, believing the world is stable is one of those ways, a gentle way, to avoid facing the truth that everything is always changing." And from here, a new part of the story begins to unfold. 2200 BCE, a world cracking all at once. There is a 5, the moment in history that did not arrive like thunder, but like a slow wave, spreading across the ancient world before anyone could truly recognize it. No specific day, no clear turning point, only small signs appearing in many places almost at the same time, like the first cracks on a surface that once seemed solid. Around 2200 BCE, the world as it was known began to change, not in one region, but in many at once. A mystery without a final answer. There are questions in history that are never truly answered in full. Not because humans are not intelligent enough, not because there is a lack of data, but because the question itself is formed from too many layers of causes, too many overlapping movements, so intertwined that they cannot be separated. And the event around 2200 BCE is perhaps one of those questions. When we look back, from a modern perspective, the mind always wants to find a beginning, a clear cause, a decisive moment when everything changed. That is how we make the world feel understandable. If there is a cause, it can be explained. If there is a cause, it can be controlled. But history, especially great transformations, rarely follows such a simple path. Was it climate A, prolonged drought, collapsing agriculture, and pulling the entire system down with it? Or was it war, conflicts spreading, dissolving structures of power? Or the economy, when trade was disrupted, and cities lost their lifeblood? Or migration, when people were forced to leave, creating pressure elsewhere? Each hypothesis has evidence. Each hypothesis has logic, but none is enough to explain everything. And that is where the true mystery begins. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble, not because we fail, but because they are not designed to have a final answer." Perhaps this event belongs to that kind of question, because when you try to find a single cause, you are placing a simple structure onto a complex reality. You are trying to make the world neater so it can be grasped, but reality does not need to be neat to exist. It can be ambiguous. It can overlap. It can hold many truths at the same time. Imagine you are looking at a vast woven tapestry. From a distance, you see a single image, but as you come closer, you begin to notice that the image is made of thousands of threads, interwoven, layered, moving in different directions. If you try to find the most important thread, you may miss the entire structure. And history is the same. The collapse of ancient civilizations may not be the result of one cause, but the intersection of many factors, unfolding at the same time. Climate shifts reduce agricultural output. That creates economic pressure. Economic weakness reduces the ability to maintain power. Weakened power leads to conflict. Conflict disrupts trade. And that cycle continues until the system can no longer sustain itself. There is no single breaking point, only a chain of changes connected to one another. Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. And perhaps what we are seeing here is not pure chaos, but a kind of complex order that we do not yet fully understand. An order where multiple causes coexist, an order that does not follow linear logic, an order where outcomes cannot be traced to a single origin. And this may feel uncomfortable, because the human mind seeks certainty. A clear answer makes us feel safe, but when that answer is not there, we are left facing something deeper, not knowing. And within that not knowing, there is a very special depth, because when you accept that not everything can be fully explained, you begin to open to a different way of seeing, a way not based on controlling the world, but on understanding that the world is more complex than what we can fully grasp. And this is not only true of history, it is also true of your own life. There are moments when you ask, why did things change? Why did this happen? And you may search for a reason, an explanation, something to bring you peace. But sometimes there is no single answer, only many factors, many experiences, many small decisions, accumulating into a result. And perhaps what matters is not finding the exact reason, but learning to be within that uncertainty without fear. Because when you can remain still, even without an answer, you enter a very different state. A state where you do not need control to feel okay. A state where you accept that the world is always larger and more complex than what you can understand. And from there, a very gentle peace begins to appear. Not the peace of knowing everything, but the peace of not needing to know everything. And from that point, a new journey begins. Not to find one final answer, but to listen to the traces left by the Earth itself, the climate hypothesis, the 4-2K event there is. Something very strange. When we think about great changes in the world, we often imagine dramatic moments, volcanoes erupting, meteorites falling, storms sweeping across the land overnight. But the 4-2K climate event was not like that. It did not arrive with an explosion. It arrived as a prolonged silence. And it is that silence that made it so unsettling. Imagine you are living in a world where everything still feels normal. The sun rises each day. The wind moves across the fields. But then, year after year, the rainfall decreases, just a little. Not enough to cause panic, but enough for farmers to feel that something is not quite right. They continue planting. They continue hoping. But the soil becomes drier, the crops weaker, and year after year, the shortage accumulates, like drops of rain that never fall. Today, scientists no longer have to guess entirely. They listen to the Earth in a very quiet way. In lake sediments, layers of fine dust accumulate over thousands of years, each layer a memory. In caves, stalactites grow millimeter by millimeter, recording the chemistry of each drop of water. And in ancient ice, tiny air bubbles remain, holding the atmosphere of a distant past. All of these silent memories tell the same story. There was a period when the world became drier, harsher, and far less stable. But what matters is not just the drought, it is how it happened. Not 1 year without rain, and then an ending, but a long sequence of rains arriving late, or not arriving enough. Rain became unpredictable, sometimes too little, sometimes at the wrong time. And for civilizations that depended almost entirely on nature, this was like the clock of the world, beginning to lose its rhythm. Carl Jung once said, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." And perhaps nature has such a pendulum too. It does not move from good to bad, but from stable to unstable. And when that pendulum begins to swing, human systems must face a reality they were never prepared for. The most striking thing is, nature does not need to attack to change history. It only needs to stop supporting. No more timely rains, no more predictable floods, no more reliable cycles. And slowly, each link begins to weaken. Crop failure, food scarcity, social tension, loss of trust. And all of this does not happen in a single day. It unfolds slowly, almost invisibly, within a single lifetime. Only when we look back, across thousands of years, do we see the full picture. And within this, there is a quiet truth. The greatest changes in the world often begin with the smallest shifts. A slight drop in rainfall, a small change in temperature, a subtle disruption in natural cycles. And over time, those small shifts become a wave that cannot be reversed. And if you listen to this story, in the stillness of the night, you may begin to feel it differently, not as a disaster, but as a rhythm, a slow, deep, irresistible rhythm of the earth, where nothing stands still, where stability is temporary, where change does not need noise to be powerful. And perhaps what makes the 4-2K event so haunting is not its destruction, but how it reflects something very familiar within the human mind, that sometimes the greatest changes in our lives do not come as dramatic moments. They come as very ordinary days, days when things feel just slightly different, days when we do not yet realize what is happening until one day we look back and see that we have traveled very far from where we once stood. And in that realization, there is a quiet stillness, not fear, but acceptance, that the world, both outside and within, is always moving, that nothing remains fixed forever, and that adaptation is what allows life to continue. Collapse is not really collapse. As we continue to move deeper into the story, leaving behind the fields that have begun to dry, leaving behind the quiet sense of scarcity in food, we begin to enter a more subtle awareness, something history does not often tell through dramatic images, but something that can only be felt if we listen slowly enough. Collapse is not always collapse. It is not walls breaking in fire. It is not thunderous battles. It is not a single day when everything ends. More often, it is like a long afternoon when the light slowly fades. But you cannot point to the exact moment when darkness begins. Cities, once full of life, begin to feel slightly emptier. Roads are still there, but no longer as crowded. Markets are still open, but no longer full. There is no single event large enough to be recorded as a disaster, but enough small changes to create a quiet feeling that something is slowly disappearing. Carl Gustav Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order." And perhaps this is also true of the collapse of civilizations. From the outside, it may look like chaos, but from within, it is a process with its own order, an order of dissolution. Power does not vanish all at once. It simply begins to disperse. Large centers of authority gradually lose their ability to control distant regions. Peripheral areas become more independent. Decisions no longer come from a single place, but fragment into many points. And within that fragmentation, the system begins to lose its coherence. There is no longer a clear flow, no longer a unified rhythm, only many small rhythms out of sync. Trade also begins to slow, not because people do not want to exchange, but because they are no longer certain that they can. Routes become less safe. Supplies become unstable. Networks of exchange begin to break. And when trade stops, it is not only goods that disappear, but the connections between people also begin to fade. If you imagine a civilization as a living body, this is not a sudden death. It is a process in which each small system begins to fail. Circulation slows, breathing weakens, signals no longer travel clearly. The body is still there, but it no longer functions as it once did. And what is remarkable is that those living in that time may not even realize they are experiencing a collapse. They simply feel that life has become more difficult. They simply notice that things are no longer as easy as before. They simply adapt, little by little, to a world that is changing. There is no alarm bell, no final moment, only transition. That is why, when we look back at history, we often ask, when did everything collapse? But perhaps that is not the right question, because there is no single moment, only a process, stretching over time, long enough that those living within it do not realize they have already stepped into a different world. And if you listen to this story as a gentle flow, you may begin to feel something very deep. That collapse is not the opposite of existence. It is simply another form of change. A form of change, slower, deeper, and sometimes irreversible. In Jungian psychology, there is an important concept: transformation. He did not see crisis as an end, but as a necessary phase through which an old structure gives way to a new one. And if we look at it this way, then empty cities, fragmented systems, broken trade networks are not only signs of collapse, but also signs of a restructuring taking place. But in that moment, no one could see it clearly. They simply lived day by day in a world that was slowly losing its familiar shape. And perhaps this is what makes the story feel closer to us than we expect, because in each of our lives, there are also such periods. No major event, no sudden change, just things slowly becoming different. And then, one day, you realize you are no longer in the same world as before. And as your mind drifts with these thoughts, slowly, the story gently carries us forward toward a more specific example, one of the greatest empires of that time, where this silent collapse becomes an essay, clearer, in small details, in decisions, and in the prime chain of consequences that follow. Mesopotamia, the fall of the Akkadian Empire. As the story continues to flow like a quiet river, we move closer to a specific place in history, a land once called the cradle of civilization, where the first cities rose between two rivers, where humans first wrote their memories into words, and also where one of the earliest empires began to dissolve, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a slow, deep, unfolding decline. That place is Mesopotamia, and at its center, the Akkadian Empire. If you imagine this empire, picture a vast system connecting many lands, many people, many resources into a single whole, a complex yet efficient network where agriculture sustained the population, where taxes sustained power, and where order was maintained through a delicate balance between center and periphery. But as we have begun to sense, when one foundational element changes, the entire system begins to tremble. And in the case of Akkad, that element was water. Drought did not arrive like a storm. It did not destroy immediately. It left no dramatic marks. It came as an absence. Rain fell less often. Rivers no longer rose as they once did. The soil slowly lost the moisture needed for crops to grow. At first, The change was difficult to notice, but over time, it became impossible to ignore. Agriculture, the foundation of the empire, began to weaken. Fields no longer yielded as before. Harvests became unpredictable. Farmers, those who sustained the rhythm of the entire system, began to struggle. And when agriculture weakened, everything above it began to shake. Taxes were no longer collected as before, not because people refused, but because they had nothing left to give. And when the flow of resources toward the center was disrupted, the machinery of power began to weaken. Rulers no longer had enough resources to maintain armies, no longer had the strength to control distant regions, no longer held the stability they once ensured. Carl Gustav Jung once suggested that any psychological system, when imbalanced, begins to disintegrate from within before collapsing outward. And this seems true of civilizations as well. Akkad did not collapse from the outside first. It weakened from within. As the center weakened, the periphery began to change. Regions once dependent became more independent. External groups began to move closer, not immediately as invaders, but as forces, sensing weakness. And then, groups like the Gutians began to rise, not because they suddenly became stronger, but because the empire they once faced was no longer what it had been. Rebellions also began to appear, not everywhere at once, but scattered in small points, like cracks forming on a surface that once seemed solid. And each crack weakened the whole just a little more. If you look at the entire process, one thing becomes clear. There is no single cause, no single moment, only many factors layered together. Drought weakens agriculture, leads to resource shortages, disrupts taxation, weakens central authority, enables rebellion and external forces. A chain reaction, tightly connected, inseparable. And this leads us to a deep realization that the larger an empire is, the more it depends on the delicate balance of many elements. And when one of those elements is lost, the entire system becomes fragile. Perhaps this is the paradox of power, that the strongest systems may also be the most fragile, because they depend on so many things at once. And as you let your mind drift with the image of Akkad, slowly, you may begin to see cities once vibrant, growing quieter, fields once green, turning dry, people once living within stability, slowly learning to adapt to a changing world. No great explosion, no clear final day, only a long dissolution until the empire no longer exists as a unified whole. And perhaps what matters most is not that Akkad collapsed, but how it collapsed. Not because of one enemy, not because of one mistake, but because of imbalance accumulated over time. And if you listen even more deeply, you may feel that this story is not only history, it is a mirror, a gentle reminder that every system, whether an empire or a personal life, depends on balance to exist. And when that balance is lost, change becomes inevitable. And from here, the story will continue into another layer, more subtle, yet equally important, where change does not come from the outside, but from the way humans interact with their environment. Over 10 long, very long periods, so long that they do not even realize that they themselves are shaping what cannot be undone. Silent crisis, soil salinization. As the story continues to flow deeper, moving away from visible disruptions like drought or conflict, we begin to enter a very different layer, a layer almost invisible, where change does not happen in the sky, but beneath human feet, quietly, slowly, and almost imperceptibly. This is the story of the soil. If you imagine a field in the soft light of a distant afternoon, you will see something that feels stable, enduring. The soil there has nourished generations. It has witnessed cycles of planting, repeating year after year. It has become part of an order that people believed would always remain. But within that seemingly eternal stability, a very slow process had already begun. Irrigation, one of humanity's most important inventions, allowed people to control water and expand agriculture. Water was channeled from rivers into fields. The soil was moistened at the right time, in the right place. Yields increased, population grew, and cities continued to expand. But each time water flowed through the soil, it carried dissolved minerals. And when the water evaporated under the sun, those minerals did not disappear. They remained. At first, the salt was minimal. No one noticed. No one worried. Crops still grew. Harvests still came. But year after year, salt slowly accumulated, very slowly, yet without stopping. This is a form of change, with almost no visible signs, no sound, no event, no clear beginning, only a silent shift. Carl Gustav Jung once said that the most important processes often occur in the unconscious, where we do not directly see them, yet are deeply affected by them. And perhaps the soil of Mesopotamia was undergoing such an unconscious. The surface remained the same, but beneath, the structure had begun to change. As salinity increased, the soil gradually lost its ability to retain water effectively. Roots struggled to absorb nutrients. Crops became weaker, smaller, less productive, not all at once, but season by season. A farmer might notice that this year's harvest is not as good as the last, but he does not know why. He may think it is the weather, or luck, or something external, but he does not see that the very soil he trusted is changing from within. And this creates a very particular feeling, a quiet unease without a clear cause. Everything continues, but no longer feels right. If you listen deeply, you will realize this is not only an agricultural issue, it is a symbol that there are processes in life so slow, so deep, that we do not notice them until the consequences become clear. Soil salinization is not an immediate disaster. It does not destroy overnight. It does not cause instant collapse, but it does something more dangerous. It weakens the foundation over time. And when the foundation weakens, everything built upon it also becomes unstable. Declining yields, declining food supply. Declining food supply, rising social pressure. Rising pressure fractures in the system. A chain reaction, slow, yet unstoppable. What makes this story profound is its irreversibility. Because once soil becomes heavily salinized, restoration is nearly impossible with the technology of that time. There is no quick way to cleanse the land, no immediate solution, only acceptance or departure. And that is when people begin to move, leaving lands that once sustained them, searching for new places where the soil is still alive, not because they want to, but because they have no choice. If you feel the entire process, you may realize this is not a story of failure. It is a story of consequence. People used the land in the best way they knew. They built systems appropriate for their time, but over time, those very systems created changes beyond their control. And perhaps this is the gentlest yet deepest lesson here, that not all disasters come from outside. Some arise from within, from repeated actions, each day, from small choices, seemingly harmless, that accumulate over time. And as your mind drifts through the image of those fields, growing drier, saltier, without noise, without drama, you may begin to feel a slow, deep transformation spreading not only through the land, but through an entire civilization. And from here, the story begins to open further, no longer only about environmental change, but about changes in belief, in how people perceive the world. When something once thought eternal, like the flow of four, a river begins to feel no longer reliable. Egypt, when the Nile lost its rhythm, as you gently close your eyes and allow your mind to slow, imagine a river once seen as the heartbeat of an entire civilization. It was not merely water flowing through land, but the rhythm of life, a promise repeating each year that crops would grow, that people would endure, that the order of the world remained intact. That river was the Nile, and for thousands of years, ancient Egyptians lived with a deep trust that the Nile would rise at the right time, recede at the right time, and leave behind fertile soil as a consistent gift of the universe. But then, one day, what seemed unchangeable began to change. Floods no longer came regularly. Some years, the water rose too little, unable to nourish the fields. Other years, it rose too high, sweeping away everything. And between these extremes, there was a space of uncertainty, a space where people no longer knew what to rely on. And when the river lost its rhythm, the entire civilization began to waver. Not because of war, but because of a prolonged silence from nature. In Jung's view, humans do not live by material alone, but by symbols. And the Nile was not just a river. It was a symbol of order, of stability, of harmony between humanity and the cosmos. Pharaoh was not just a king, but the embodiment of that harmony. When the Nile flowed smoothly, it meant the universe still agreed with the order of things. But when the river became unpredictable, it was not only agriculture that was affected, it was meaning itself that began to fracture. People did not only lose crops, they began to lose faith. And faith, the most invisible yet powerful force, once shaken, quietly destabilizes everything else. And slowly, power began to disperse. Not through loud rebellion, but through the gradual withdrawal of belief. Local regions governed themselves. Small rulers emerged. The central system faded. No one declared the end, but everyone felt it was no longer the same. And all of this happened slowly. No single day of collapse. Only seasons, years, each slightly different, each slightly harder, until one day, the change was already complete. And perhaps this story is not only about Egypt, it reflects something within the human mind. We too build our lives around rivers, habits, beliefs, patterns we trust to remain. And when one of them begins to shift, we do not always notice immediately. Sometimes, it is only a quiet feeling that something is no longer the same. But the deepest message is not collapse, it is transformation. Because when one system fades, another begins to form. And within uncertainty, there is also possibility. And as you continue listening, you may begin to soften, to feel that even within instability, life continues, gently, quietly, always becoming like the river that once shaped an entire civilization. Indus, a gentle disappearance. There are disappearances that make no sound, no collapsing walls, no burning battles, no clear destruction, only a slow retreat, almost unnoticed. The Indus civilization left history in this way. Cities once carefully planned, streets once straight, drainage systems once advanced, were not destroyed. They simply became empty. people did not vanish in a moment. They just left, little by little, like a tide receding without a sound. And if you listen, in the stillness of night, you may feel something different here. No enemy, no apocalypse, only time, environment, and small repeated choices. Perhaps rivers shifted, perhaps the land dried, perhaps rains no longer came on time. And then families began to leave, seeking smaller places, closer to water, where life could continue more simply. This dissolution may seem sad from afar, but if you look deeper, it carries a quiet beauty. Because not every ending needs to be a collapse. Some endings are like a long breath, slow, natural, necessary, and perhaps this reflects something very deep within us. Not everything in life ends with a dramatic break. Some things simply fade. And when you allow yourself to rest in that realization, you may feel something very gentle, a soft release, as if you no longer need to hold everything together. No need to control though. No need to understand everything. Just breathe slowly and let everything drift as quietly as a civilization that once existed and then softly dissolved into the stillness of time. A fractured global network. As you continue to drift slowly within the flow of this story, after cities dissolved in silence, after people departed without leaving clear traces, something else begins to emerge. No longer a single land, no longer an isolated civilization, but an invisible network stretching across deserts, rivers, distant seas, where human beings were once connected by pathways too vast for the eye to fully see. Imagine merchants moving slowly across vast landscapes, carrying metals from distant mountains, timber from dense forests, and rare luxuries accessible only to the powerful. Each step they took was not merely movement, but a thread, weaving a vast tapestry of exchange, of dependence, of connection between civilizations that seemed far apart. And for a long time, this tapestry functioned so smoothly that people began to believe it was natural. That metal would always arrive on time, that wood would always be available, that what was needed would always come from somewhere, from someone they might never meet. But then, like a single thread gently pulled out of place, a link breaks. Perhaps a land falls into drought, no longer able to sustain the caravans. Perhaps a route becomes dangerous as conflict begins to appear. Or perhaps a system already under strain requires only a small shift to lose its balance. And when one link breaks, the effect does not stop there. It spreads like a subtle vibration, traveling through the entire structure. A place without metal cannot produce tools. A place without tools cannot farm effectively. A place without food begins to destabilize. And from there, change continues to ripple outward, not loudly, not suddenly, but inevitably. In the depth of psychology, Carl Gustav Jung suggested that human beings do not exist as isolated entities, but as part of a larger system, a collective unconscious, an invisible network of connections we are not wrested, always aware of. And if you listen slowly, you may notice that this ancient network is not so different from the way your own mind works. Each thought is a link, each memory a connection, each emotion a current, and most of the time, everything flows so smoothly that you do not notice until something shifts. A thought repeats more often, an emotion grows slightly heavier, a memory quietly returns. And like those ancient networks, the change does not stay contained. It spreads, it touches other parts, It causes the whole system to tremble, ever so gently. But what is interesting is that just as history shows a break is not always an ending, sometimes it is a reminder that the system has become too dependent, too strained, too complex to remain flexible. And when a link breaks, the system must change. Not to return to what it was, but to find a new balance. Perhaps this is what ancient civilizations experienced. They did not only lose trade routes, they lost a way of living, a way of organizing the world, a belief that everything would continue as before. And within that loss, something else emerged. Smaller communities, more independent ways of living, systems less dependent on distant connections. If you notice carefully, this may feel familiar, because even in modern life, you too live within such a network. Digital connections, supply systems, relationships, all interconnected more tightly than ever. And that brings strength, but also a quiet fragility. And perhaps that is why this story is told at night. Not to make you anxious, but to gently remind you that not everything needs to be held together. Not every connection must be maintained at all costs. Sometimes, a small break is simply the system adjusting itself, naturally, silently, necessarily. As your body softens, as your breath slows, you may feel this within yourself. Thoughts no longer need to connect. Emotions no longer need explanation. Inner structures can gently loosen, and in that quiet space, nothing is truly broken. There is only rest, rebalancing, a state where you do not need to hold everything together, but simply let it drift, as ancient networks once trembled, then settled into a rhythm, slow, deep, and distant, that it dissolves into the stillness of night, leaving you in a softer space, a quieter space, ready to drift deeper into sleep. Migration, conflict, and transformation. As lands gradually dry, as fields no longer sustain life as before, a slow movement begins, not loud, not sudden, but like a gentle wave spreading across communities. People begin to leave, not because they want to, but because they have no other choice. They carry what remains: seeds, memories, stories, and unspoken worries, and step into unfamiliar lands where the future is uncertain. And as they move, they carry not only life, but pressure, because every new land is already inhabited. Other systems exist, other balances already formed. And as populations grow, as resources become scarce, friction begins to appear. Not always war, but small tensions, subtle conflicts, boundaries becoming clearer. And if you listen deeply, you may realize this is not driven by aggression. It is driven by survival. People do not move to conquer. They move to live. In Jungian psychology, there is the idea of archetypes, deep patterns, guiding human behavior unconsciously. And one of the most profound is the journey of leaving the old to find the new, the journey beyond safety, into the unknown. And perhaps these ancient migrations were not only responses to environment, but expressions of a deeper law, that life is always moving. And when you look closely, nothing remains fixed forever. No civilization, no land, no system. Everything is in motion. And perhaps within you, the same movement is unfolding. Different thoughts, different desires, different emotions, sometimes colliding. And in those moments, you may feel tension, confusion, uncertainty. But gently, this is not chaos. It is transition. Like ancient people leaving dry lands, a part of you is leaving what no longer nourishes you. And that is not something to resist, because at a deeper level, you are not losing anything. You are moving. And as your body softens, as your mind releases control, you may feel a quiet rhythm, slow, deep, like footsteps across ancient lands, uncertain of destination, yet continuing. And within that continuation, there is a quiet trust that somehow life will find its way. And so will you. No need to rush, no need to understand everything. Just gently follow the movement until everything slows and you softly drift into sleep. Crisis of faith and political order, when fields no longer yield, when rivers lose their rhythm, something deeper begins to change. Not only the environment, but belief, because every civilization is built not only from stone, but from trust. Trust in the seasons, trust in the land, trust in leaders to maintain order. And when nature changes, slowly, inevitably, that trust begins to fracture. At first, no one notices, but small signs accumulate, and eventually, people feel something difficult to name, that the world no longer works as it once did. And when trust fades, power loses its foundation, not through dramatic collapse, but through quiet dissolution, like ice melting in sunlight. And if you listen deeply, this too exists within you. Old beliefs softening, old certainties fading, not as loss, but as transformation. Because when one structure dissolves, another begins to form. And in that space, you do not need certainty, only presence, breathing slowly, allowing, letting everything settle, like still water after the wind has passed. Quiet, very quiet, until your body softens, your breath deepens, and your mind no longer needs to hold anything, only a gentle space where you slowly drift deeper into sleep. There is no single cause. As we quietly look back at what happened around 2200 BCE, a very different feeling begins to emerge. Not a collapse as a sudden fall, but a series of small tremors, layered upon one another, until an entire world could no longer hold its original. And perhaps what makes this story so profound is not the question of what caused it all, but the realization that there was no single cause at all. We often seek simplicity in complexity, a clear answer, a specific cause, a starting point where we can say this is the reason. But history rarely works that way. It is more like a woven tapestry, where each individual thread holds little meaning, but together they create an image that no single thread could explain on its own. The climate changed, not in a single day, but over many years. Rainfall became unpredictable. Rivers carried less water. The land slowly lost its fertility. At first, no one really noticed, and even when someone did, they did not think it would lead to anything significant. Yet, these slow changes formed the very first layer. Then, the economy began to tremble. When harvests became unstable, food became scarce. When food became scarce, prices shifted. When prices shifted, social balance began to tilt. Those who were once secure began to feel uncertain. Systems that once flowed smoothly began to show small cracks. And within those cracks, war did not always begin with ambition, but sometimes as a consequence of scarcity. When resources were not enough, people were forced to compete, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice. Small conflicts gradually grew into waves, pushing societies into constant tension. At the same time, people began to move, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. When a land could no longer sustain them, they searched for another. But each migration placed pressure on new lands. Places once stable now had to share resources. Communities once peaceful faced change. And so, each element, climate, economy, war, migration, environment, did not exist separately. They were connected, like links in a long, invisible chain. When one link trembled, it pulled the others. There was no clear beginning and no definite end. The domino effect is not a loud collapse. It begins with a gentle touch, almost unnoticed. One piece falls, then another, and another, until the entire structure can no longer stand. In the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the human mind holds similar systems. It is not a simple entity, but layers upon layers, experiences, memories, emotions, beliefs. And when one part shifts, it rarely remains alone. A small worry can lead to another thought. An old memory can change how you see the present. A vague feeling can spread into something difficult to name. And like ancient civilizations, the mind does not collapse for a single reason. It changes through accumulation. And perhaps this brings a very gentle understanding that you do not need to find one single cause for everything you are feeling, because sometimes no such cause exists. There are only layers of experience stacked over time. And when you realize this, you can release the need to understand everything. You do not need to explain every emotion. You do not need to trace every cause. You do not need to make everything clear right away. Because, like history, a part of truth always lies beyond full understanding. And that is not something to fear. It is simply how the world moves. When you accept that everything is layered, you begin to feel something else, that everything can also slowly change in the other direction. Just as a system can collapse through many causes, it can also heal through many small things. A slightly deeper sleep, a slightly slower breath, a slightly gentler thought. You do not need to change everything at once. Just one small thing, then another, and gradually, the links within you will begin to rearrange. Not loudly, not suddenly, just slowly, like deep ocean waves, moving gently, unseen. And as you remain in that understanding that everything does not need a single cause, that everything can simply be, your mind begins to soften, less tense, more open, lighter, as if you no longer need to hold everything together, no longer need to understand it all, no longer need to control, only to be here and let everything drift naturally, just as history has always and will always unfold. Not an end, but a restructuring. When we listen to the story of civilizations that have collapsed, perhaps what unsettles us most is not the loss, but the idea that everything can end. But if we look deeper, through the lens of Carl Jung, we begin to see a gentler truth, that in this world, nothing truly disappears. Only old forms quietly make way for new ones. A once crowded city may become empty, but that does not mean life has ended. The people who lived there did not vanish. They moved, they adapted, they carried memories, and began again elsewhere. Roads once filled with sound may turn to dust, but footsteps continue. And that is what history rarely tells us, that collapse is not a full stop, but a pause, a space where a new rhythm begins. When an empire dissolves, power does not disappear, it disperses, flowing into smaller, closer communities. Rigid structures are replaced by more flexible ones, like water, when no longer held in a container, finds its own way and continues to flow. Perhaps what happened around 2200 BCE looks like catastrophe to us today, But to those who lived through it, it may have felt like a transition, a slow transition, without noise, without clear boundaries, only small changes accumulating until a new world took shape. And if you listen deeply, you will realize this story is not only about the past, it is also about you. Because in every life, there are quiet collapses. An old version of yourself no longer fits. An old belief no longer holds. An old path no longer leads where you wish to go. And in those moments, the first feeling is often loss. But if you are patient, if you are gentle with yourself, you will see it is not an ending. It is a restructuring. A part of you is rearranging, releasing what is no longer needed, making space for something more true. Like ancient civilizations, you are learning to adapt, not by resisting change, but by moving with it. And perhaps this is the greatest strength of being human. Not the ability to control the world, but the ability to continue, to adapt, to find meaning, even when everything around for you is no longer the same. So, as you lie here, in the quiet of the night, you do not need to fear change, because deep within you, there is an ancient intelligence, one that has carried humanity through drought, through the fall of empires, through uncertainty, and still continued, quietly, steadily, like your breath, in this very moment. And within that breath, there is a gentle reminder that nothing truly ends. Everything simply changes form. And you are also, softly, becoming someone new. A long twilight of the ancient world. As we arrive at the final point of this story, everything does not seem to end with a great collapse. There is no moment when the sky suddenly turns dark in a single day. No single impact that shatters everything. But instead, there is a long twilight, a slow process, silent and almost impossible to notice if you only look for a brief moment. Imagine the sun does not disappear instantly, but gradually sinks below the horizon. The light is still there, but fading, little by little. The darkness does not rush in, but spreads gently and patiently. That is how many civilizations ended, not through an apocalypse, but through years without rain, through harvests that were no longer the same, through small decisions made in desperation and repeated, and again, and until they accumulated into a state, change that could no longer be reversed. Perhaps what makes this story so profound is not the fall of empires, but the way it happened, so slowly that those living within that time may never have realized they were standing in the middle of a turning point in history. Carl Gustav Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And perhaps this is also true for civilizations. When silent changes in climate, in land, in belief, unfold beneath the surface, until one day everything is no longer the force. Same, yet no one can point to exactly when or why. That long twilight is not only a story of the past, but also a quiet mirror, reflecting how every system, including our own lives, can change. Not always through great events. Sometimes it is just the days you sleep a little less, the times you ignore a feeling, the small decisions that seem unimportant, but when accumulated, they create an entirely new. And what is remarkable is that this change is not always negative, because just like twilight, although it signals the end of a day, it is also the doorway to a quiet night, a space for rest, for renewal, and for beginning again. Ancient civilizations, after they dissolved, did not disappear from history. They transformed into new forms of life, smaller communities, more flexible, and sometimes more sustainable. And within that transformation, there is a beauty that is difficult to see, because it is not loud, not recorded in great victories, but exists only in small changes, quiet adaptations, and deeply human choices. Perhaps what this story is whispering to you is not fear of collapse, but a gentler truth that everything in life has its own rhythm, a time to begin, a time to grow, and also a time to slow, to sane, fade, before becoming something else. And if you are in a twilight of your own, a phase where things are no longer clear, no longer certain, then perhaps it is not an ending, but simply a transition, a space between what has been and what has not yet come. So, as you lie there, listening to this story and feeling your breath gradually slow, remember, not every change needs to be understood immediately. Not every question needs an answer right now. Sometimes it is enough to allow yourself to be within that in-between moment, just as the ancient world once passed through its twilight, slowly and silently. And then, like every twilight, darkness will come, not to end things, but to guide you into something deeper, quieter, and gentler, a state where you can let go, without holding, without controlling, only breathing and allowing everything to drift naturally, like the flow of history, and of yourself. And as that long twilight continues to spread, something very subtle happens. Not everything disappears, but everything becomes less important. Cities once loud grow quiet. Roads once crowded grow empty. Centers of power, once in control of everything, now become hollow structures, as if the world is gently letting go of itself. Yet within that letting go, a new kind of order begins to form. No longer vast empires, but smaller communities, more connected, closer to nature, and perhaps closer to the true rhythm of being human. From the perspective of depth psychology, this is like the old dissolving, so the new can emerge, not through destruction, but through the gradual withdrawal of energy until it simply becomes still. And perhaps this is also how the human mind works. There are beliefs, once so solid, that over time no longer fit, not because they were wrong, but because they are no longer alive within us. And so they recede, quietly, without drama, simply no longer there, like civilizations that once disappeared. And this makes collapse no longer as frightening as we imagined, because it is not an absolute end, but part of a cycle where everything is allowed to change, to dissolve, and to be restructured into another form. And when you think about that, you may begin to realize that stability is not found in things never changing, but in the ability to move with change, gently, like your breath right now, not holding, not resisting, just coming and going, like civilizations that came, flourished, and then gently faded, leaving behind not emptiness, but traces, lessons, and a deep silence that, if you listen long enough, feels not frightening, but peaceful. And perhaps that is the final message of this long twilight, that every ending contains within it a quiet beginning, not rushed, not loud, but it sees, just like the way you are now drifting into sleep, naturally, gently, and deeply.